morning, and welcome to the Procure Smarter podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon Cook. With over 20 years of experience in hospitality purchasing and consulting, and a PhD in procurement ethics, I'm on a mission to procure smarter. Procuresmart is a cloud-based boutique purchasing agency. Our team has experience with projects of all sizes, including conversions, renovations, and new construction. We offer dynamic customer service and competitive pricing. Reach out to us today to learn more about how Procuresmart can purchase for your next project. Today, we are going to talk to John Fox. John lectures around the world on the human effects of lighting and the power to shape our lives. We will talk about how John applies his history of dance, industrial design, and theater to his work at ASCENTI Lighting. Stay tuned. We are talking today to John Fox, president and owner or just president of ASCENTI Lighting?
President and owner of ASCENTI Lighting.
President and owner.
Yep.
All right. And you call yourself a lighting design futurist. So tell me what that means to you.
So my wife and I have been in the lighting industry. We met in school at the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. And we have been doing lighting for over 30 years now. And I'm always the one that is a lighting designer and in our projects that I tend to spend time coming up with something new, something that is pushing the boundaries of whether it's technology or materials or an approach. And so, for example, I was into LEDs long before it was acceptable to use LEDs. It was kind of like on the fringe. And I was always pushing any technology because I felt like it was sort of my job to be the futurist. And my wife, she likes to specify. She wants to find the products that already exist. And so we've been a good team in that regard for, as a husband and wife in the same industry, because I'd always introduce her to the new ideas and the new things that came along. And so I saw some guy with a podcast or maybe a Twitter handle that called himself the Futurist. It could have been the Bitcoin Futurist or something. And I was like, I like calling myself a futurist. I don't like calling myself lighting designer. It seems a little too boxed in. So by calling myself the Futurist, lighting futurist or something, it gives a little insight to someone who, it may be new to me and our company and our approach that I tend to push the boundaries. So we call myself.
Okay. Well, when I set up this podcast meeting with you, I did a little deep dive into all things John Fox and ASCENTI Lighting. So we're just going to dive into some things that I saw. But one of the things that I saw was talk to me how 3D printing is working with ASCENTI Lighting.
So, we've been doing 3D printing and prototyping in parts for probably 5 years now. And it's been a sort of a huge asset to sort of our workflow. As a custom lighting manufacturer, and as you know, when you work with hospitality work, things are always very quick. And the turnaround and the development has to be fairly quick. But when you're trying to prototype things that are maybe on the edge of never been done before kind of thing, what we end up doing is wanting to see if it works. And so 3D printing, especially with the SLA, which is it's a laser setup, we can actually use prototype builds, so you can print something in a couple hours that it's going to be kind of rough, or you can run a slower print using a high density resin, or it would be a high impact resin, and then you can actually print something that's actually be functional. So we've been using prototyping and production level 3D printing for our company. It's been a huge asset. I can probably send you some imagery of some of those projects so you can maybe overlay it of how we use 3D printing in our world. But it's been a godsend. We just love using it to solve problems, and we can come up with something fairly quickly within a couple of days and present it to the client, and they go, okay, yeah, that's what we were thinking. So it's kind of
Well,
cool.
yeah, and I would imagine, having been a purchasing agent forever, there are times where designers or architects will come up with an idea, but we really don't know how the fine details fit together or if that's even going to work. So it's really something that you can answer very quickly for the customer.
I think I consider it a sort of a secret sauce of what we can do for that project's from a project's perspective. But yeah, it's been great.
And
And I would say one of the cool things about sort of what ASCENTI does that also adds onto that is our ability as a lighting designer, as a specifier, in my 30 years of experience, I also know what needs to be approved through that process, right? And so when you submit a drawing to your client to get sign off before you start doing all your purchasing, that information needs to be communicated from your manufacturers, right? So you need to get that information, gather it into a package and submit it. And we know that process very well. So we can actually turn around cut sheets really quickly, sometimes within the same day, that are custom. And so when you can find standard product all day long and cut sheets and kind of slip them in. But if you're doing custom and you just like, well, how long is that going to take? And depending on our workload, we can often turn something around in the same day, and it's presentable. It's something you can hand to your clients and get a sign off. So
right. And
that
where is ASCENTI manufacturing at?
So we're a U.S. based manufacturing company based out of California, LA, Orange County area. So we're very central to the Southern California market. And we often hand deliver things to our hotels and high-end homes directly. So, which is great, because if you're a custom project, if you got a custom chandelier, for example, and you need to know how to hang it, and there's sort of some subtleties on how to handle it, we have a team that takes care of that. So, and we have what we call a bug out box, and it's literally it's a kit of tools and devices and extra pieces of things all in one giant ready to go flight box. And it's, you can literally drop it out of an airplane and probably still survive. And we can just throw that in and be on site in a matter of hours. So depending on where we're at, I mean, if we do projects in Vegas, we can just throw it in the check baggage and head out. So
right. And I was going to ask you what are one of your strengths, but I would say that's probably one of your biggest strengths, that you can do that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that, I've been in this industry a while, and you talk to the people that have been doing it before you, and so I've got some good mentors and some great sort of what I call the board of advisors that they know who you are, they know who they are. It's been helpful, because what happens is you have to learn that in the hospitality world, it's all about hospitality, and literally your entire team has to view the world through that lens. And if you know how to take care of customers, you're gonna see repeat custom. You're gonna be a repeat client or a vendor to those teams. And so, we do our best to take care of the customer, and hopefully the rest of it comes behind, because if you take care of the customer, that's what they want. They want to go to sleep knowing that it's going to take care of. And I think people expect that from us.
Okay. You have an amazing photo gallery on your website. I looked at all of it. They were beautiful. Is there one of those that sticks out as a challenge that you overcame, or just something that blew you out of the water that you didn't even realize you could create?
Well, one of the most recent ones, and there's the story that I tell a lot, which is the Las Vegas project, but it's not really highlighted in our video and our website very well. But the one that is the most recent was working for GSK, which is one of the companies that helped build the COVID response. They build the shots, and so they're part of the pharmaceutical world, right? And they asked us to come up with a double helix DNA strand that would be 80 feet long and fly through sort of this triple high space at one of their buildings that's just finishing up. out in Philadelphia. And so, no one else could really figure out how to do that. And they kind of had just sort of a rendering of sort of this space lighting flying through it. And I'll send you some videos so you've got that, and some renderings. And, they asked us, how would you do that? And, as a team, we came up with a great direction where the frame is so light. So here's a 12-foot long chandelier. We broke them up into 12-foot sections, actually like 14 feet, but roughly 12 feet, and there's 7 of them. And this long thing flies through this space, but it is so lightweight, each 12-foot section you can pick up with one guy. So he'd be up there and he'd hand it to the contractor, hand it to the next guy, and then hang it, and then move on to the next one. And the whole thing took 6 hours to install. And the contractor didn't think that was possible. He looked at what we were doing. He's like, "You're going to be here all week, right?" I'm like, if we do this right, I think we should be done after lunch. And, they did it. The contractor was fantastic. And our team did a really good job of thinking of all the little things that need to be done. But it wasn't something that, I could create installation instructions for and then send it on its way. It had to be managed. Right. But it was me pointing at things, and there was little scratches at the end, like, there was during shipment, something got scratched and it was painted white at the time. And we had a rattle can that matched the powder coating that we got from the powder coater. He said, if you get any scratches, use this, right? So we had all the things that we needed. So when we just sprayed a little bit, and it was done.
That's amazing.
But, yeah, it was a huge home run. And we're actually doing a whole podcast to kind of talk about it one of these days. So maybe we can do a link to that project after we're done putting together.
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about the podcast. But let me first say, I saw on the website that you lecture around the world on the human effects of lighting and the power that does to shape our lives. So first of all, how did you get into lecturing? And then talk to me about what you see the power of lighting is.
Well, this is such a great question, and it's got a couple layers to it. But one of the things that, when you talk about getting into lecturing, I think, as someone who's become senior in their life, and I'm not a senior yet, but as I become well versed in the world of lighting, lecturing became something that I think is part of what I can do to give back to our industry. I'm active in the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society, and I spend time trying to provide the people and the world around me with the knowledge that I have and the experience I've had, so that it's well documented and part of the industry. So, like, we're in the process of rewriting the design guidelines for the hospitality world. Well, I mean, if there's somebody, I feel like I've got a good knowledge base of it's hospitality, and so I can spend time and sort of direct that standards for the world. So it's been good. And we wrote for the tour that we did with the lecture, which was titled "Your LEDs Are Poking Me in the Ganglion Cells," is a very sort of technical idea of getting poked in the eye with something harsh. And the blue LEDs that we have, that are 90% of all LEDs all produced, are all based off of blue LED. And so we go into a little bit of we go into deep dives on the technology of blue LEDs and wavelengths. And so we trademarked a phrase called circadian safe, which is really geared towards knowing what blue light is and how to avoid it when you need to, and how to get extra blue light when you need it as well. So there's a little bit of both in that world. And so lecturing has been sort of helpful in sort of getting the technology across, and also getting the word out that our light environment shouldn't be based off of the energy usage, which is pointing back towards a utility plant, but it needs to be pointed towards the human experience, and are we doing the right thing? Oftentimes you can look at it from a perspective of similar worlds, like food. Like if if the food that you're going to be eating, if you look at it from a perspective of where did it come from and is it good for me, is versus, well, it was mass produced and had to be done cheaply, that's looking back towards how it gets made versus how should it come. Should we be eating mass produced food? Well, if you can avoid it, you shouldn't be eating mass produced industrialized food. You should be eating raw, natural foods. Maybe not necessarily raw, but as raw. You should be eating as real, that we call real food, as possible. Well, what's real lighting? And we've had some conversations with that over at CEDIA for WellCon 2021. I'm also on a lecture there. If you wanted to go see, we get into a deep dive with a panel of 4 of us. But yeah, it's a great process to sort of hone your skills and be able to communicate that. And so podcasting, I think, helps communicate what you're trying to do, and also refines how you communicate that to your customer base.
Right. So when did you start your podcast?
Last month.
Yeah, it was. I thought I saw it was fairly recently.
Yeah, my first interview was with my wife, who she developed at her company, she developed a design empathy program that is currently being launched and getting rave reviews from the company and the employees there. It's called a integrated design residency, is what they called it, the IDR. But it's really design empathy. That's how it started, and I think it's a phenomenal approach to sort of getting the rest of the team, because you have big companies. She works for a large architectural firm, LPA Inc. or LPA Design Studio, and they have offices, in Texas and California and I think Arizona, but maybe not. But it's you've got 600 people you've got to sort of train and teach and sort of unify and get them all on the same page. And so what you do is you take people that are new to the company and you introduce them to other parts of the integrated design team that wouldn't necessarily they would spend time with. And by spending time with them, they understand a little bit more about what it takes to put a whole package together. Because they can wave their hand and go, okay, I need the interior design work, I need the landscape architect work, I need the engineering work, I need the mechanical work, and I need it by Friday. And then, if they have a little bit of empathy to the design team and their workloads and what it takes to put together a set of packages for different phases of construction, maybe they can be a little more realistic about how they approach the rest of the team and develop empathy for the rest of the team. So I think it's a phenomenal start to a podcast. And of course, being married for a long time, it's easy to have that conversation and no stress. So
that is fantastic. Okay, so your bio says you have a history of dance, industrial design, and theater to your work. So obviously I have to ask, you took 7 semesters of dance in college.
I did.
Tell me, how do you use the dance and industrial design and theater in your work?
Actually, what I use, it feels like I use everything that I've ever done. I mean, I'm also a pilot and all these other things I don't even talk about in my bios, but the dance is really, and the way I describe it, I actually worked with a lighting designer early in my career who, that's all he did. He worked for a dance company or dance companies and traveled the United States following the troupe and lighting, and it was the lighting designer for that troupe. So it's in a phenomenal kind of world where you get to, and it's moving sculpture, right? Dance is sculpture created by somebody's mind and how they want to communicate sculpture. And if you can light sculpturally, you can actually convey a lot of that emotion and a lot of that the design intent through the lighting. And so lighting and dance is literally hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. It really is key to sort of the beauty of what you see. And so dance is basically moving sculpture, and that's, and when you deal with product and developing of lighting, you're basically sculpting things as well with your hands and your mind. And it's just been, that's just, I think, been something that's helped me to sort of see the world in a way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the what was the other one? It was design. It was dance.
Industrial
Oh,
design and theater.
yeah. So theater work. I ran the lighting theater at the University of Kansas while I was there for a little while, and theater is all about color, right? It's all about the right color and the right locations. It's also about sculpture, but it's all static, generally speaking, other than the actors that come in and out. And so there's a connection there. And I have an architectural engineering degree with an emphasis in lighting. That's my degree. It's my wife's degree. So it's very specific as far as we're in the built environment. So by adding some of this theater work, which is all temporary, and this design and development in dance, I felt my goal was to try to just expand my experiences when it comes to design. And so that was really my goal when I was going to school, was to take everything I could that would support a design industry, design world. And the sculpture part, or the industrial design part, actually was probably my favorite element to that. I ended up taking a class under Victor Papanek. And Victor Papanek was the first designer to have his book translated to 60 different languages worldwide. And he actually worked directly under Frank Lloyd Wright, which to me was an amazing part of his story. Because we, as students, we got to know this guy. We would go to his house and hang out and kind of, drink and spend time with this professor who seemed to have these unending level numbers of stories and fantastical stories working for Frank Lloyd Wright and the world he was in. And when the cool part about Victor was that he actually lied to Frank Lloyd Wright when he first started working for him, because the law at the time in Chicago was you had to be 15 or 16 years old to work for a living. Like, they were starting to work on labor laws. And so he had to lie and say he was 16 when he was actually 15 to go work for for Frank Lloyd Wright. And so he learned everything he wanted about minimalism. And so Victor Papanek is all about tearing away. So it's another element of sculpture they talk about, which is, if you work with stone, your goal is to take everything that is not needed, and what the sculpture is what's left, right? And Victor Papanek believed the same thing. It was all about, take everything that's additional and take it out. Just go until you're down to the bare minimum of the design, and then you have a design that is functional. So it's design through function. And anyway, it was a lot of fun learning from him, and I think that added to my world as
That's
well.
a fantastic perspective, and one that I have never had a lighting vendor or any vendor ever bring to the table. Okay, so I have one more thing that I dug up in my research. You and I have a tiny little connection. You went to the University of Kansas, and I married a Kansas boy.
Oh.
And so I noticed that you were actually very athletic in college. You played a lot of different sports.
Yeah, I mean, it was all for fun. I wasn't, sponsored, or I didn't play at the whatever it's called, the football. I didn't play any of the sports that were on television or anything. I was on the rowing crewing team for a short period of time. I was a lifeguard on campus, so I ultimately did triathlons after I graduated. And then play a little bit of soccer for fun, but it was mostly racquetball that I ended up playing. I played for the university there, and so we got to play against Missouri and Iowa and a couple places. But racquetball was the other sport that probably mostly impacted me now, because I play squash. I picked that up over when my wife and I moved to Southeast Asia. So
Wow.
I've
Okay, so
lived
that
on ever
opens
since.
up a line of conversation. You and your wife lived in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I don't talk about it in my bio very much, but my wife and I were hired by the Sultan of Brunei, and to help with nation building in the island of Borneo, which is right and centralized around the Philippines and Indonesia and Japan and Hong Kong and all that. So we were working for the royal family of Brunei, and anything you could think of, we were lighting. We were basically working for the country. So we did the roadways, we did the shopping centers, we did the houses, we did the royal palaces, we did the resorts, we did the conference centers. Anything you can think of that was ready that needed to be for a country to come up to a
That is
first world.
fascinating. Oh my gosh, that
Yeah,
is so fascinating.
and there's so many funny stories and crazy stories. Those would require a
A
couple
whole
of
nother
bottles of
podcast.
wine, I would imagine.
I will get you to come back on and we will just talk about that.
Would love it.
Well, John, this has been really interesting. You've been a phenomenal guest. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thanks for dealing with all my hiccups in the beginning, and no one will ever know. So
No one will
I
ever
guess we
know.
don't
We'll
have
cut
to.
all of that out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a nice day.
Thank you very much. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me on, and I'd love to have you on one of my shows as well.
Yeah, I would love to be a guest.
I think it would be perfect. I have lots of questions for you. So.
Okay. All right. Send
right.
it. Get on my calendar and send it my way.
Let's do it.
Okay. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Procure Smarter podcast. If you're enjoying our show, don't forget to follow us on Spotify and leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. If you do, we'll shout you out on our next episode. We're currently interviewing guests for season 2 of Procure Smarter, dropping next spring. If you've got a take on the hospitality and purchasing industry, we'd love to hear it. For interest in being a guest, you can reach out to us at our website, LinkedIn, or Instagram. For all Procure Smarter episodes, find us on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen. For service inquiries, please reach out to us at our website, procuresmartco.com. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Procure Smarter podcast.